Hi, I'm Carolyn Ball, J Baba. Robin's asked me to tell my Baba story, and of course, telling our Baba stories is one of the most wonderful ways to share Baba with people, so I'm excited about it. Um, so I kind of think of my Baba journey as one that focused on a couple of things, and one is beads on one string, and the other is a life of service. And I grew up in a family that lived overseas a lot. My dad was a superintendent of schools, and he liked being overseas. So we lived in Brazil and Taiwan and Peru and in between a bunch of places in the United States. And when I was older, I also continued to move around and lived in Mexico for a while and also Canada. So this exposure to other cultures was always part of my life, and other ways of doing things and other kinds of spirituality. And also, as a child of teachers, I was brought up as someone who cared about being of service to other people. My first spiritual experience was when we lived in Brazil, and this lovely lady who was a missionary had a little daily vacation Bible school in the summer. And she gathered us all together one time and asked us to say a prayer together. And then she said, I know someone in this group wants to ask Jesus to come into their hearts. And we're all kind of squirming, and nobody's answering, and squirming some more. I'm starting to feel sorry for her. She says it several times. And finally, just to help her feel better, I think, I raised my hand. It wasn't really that I wanted Jesus to come in my heart. I didn't have any concept of that, but I wanted her to feel better. So I raised my hand, and she said a prayer for me and thanked Jesus for coming into this child's heart. I was about 7 years old at the time. And for days after that, I was in this wonderful, happy, blissful place. And it was my first impression or idea that Jesus could come into your heart, or that God could come into your heart. So that was kind of the beginning for me. My family was very ecumenical. Like I said, we traveled a lot, but also when we went to different cities and towns that we lived in, they would not just go to particular religion or religious service, but they would look around for a minister that they liked and who they thought gave a good message. So the idea of content being important started to emerge early in my life. Followed that Christian tradition and still love Jesus. But when I was out of school and starting to work in the world, I started to study yoga. And eventually I joined a yoga organization, taught yoga for many years, and I even took vows as a sannyasin or a swami. So I was exposed for the first time as Eastern tradition and Hindu tradition, and also that made sense to me. Reincarnation made sense. The whole thing started to be a lot more reasonable to me than the more narrow Christian perspective that you had one shot at it in this lifetime and that's it. So, but I realized as a swami that was really such a limited thing for me. I remember sitting on the steps of the yoga center one time. I was stationed in San Francisco, and I was sitting there going, gosh, these orange clothes, people are honoring me, and it's ridiculous. I'm just me, and there's no reason that people should give me more respect because I'm wearing orange clothes. And I really didn't align with that. It didn't make sense to me. And also, I felt that there was something missing, and that was an emphasis on love. And I had always wondered, where's the focus on love? Why aren't we thinking more about love? So these were early perspectives that, as I found out later, they were very much part of what Baba was teaching and sharing to people. Not to be so caught up in appearances and being honored in the world, and also his emphasis on love. But one of the things that was important about that, it was the Shivananda Yoga Society, and another important part of that was that I later found out that Baba had a connection to Shivananda. And when I read the Meher journals, which were written part of the early writing from Baba, there was, every issue had writing from Shivananda. So that to me just kind of cemented that connection that I experienced later. I did that for a while, taught yoga, and then I got interested in Native American tradition. And that was a little different. It had a different kind of discipline. It was much more practical. And I was a sun dancer in that tradition, and I studied with somebody named Mary Thunder, who, it was amazing to me later, again, applications being part of knowing that Baba was there in my life all along. Thunder, when I experienced some of the disciplines and ways that Thunder worked, it was interesting to me later that I read all about Baba in Manzilimim, and Thunder would do things that were verbatim sometimes that Baba did. So later, when I actually met Baba and learned about Baba, I asked Thunder if she knew who he was. Do you know who Meher Baba is? I asked her. And she looked at me with this smile that helped me know that she always knew who he was. And I started to wonder if maybe she was an agent of his. Of course, I have no idea. But she also created this foundation of practicality, practical spirituality, living in the world, but loving God. And so these two early approaches for me were very much in alignment with Baba when I finally did come to know who Baba was. I'd actually seen pictures of him way back when I had been a Swami in the early days. There was a big billboard, and I had to work over in Walnut Creek. And there was a giant billboard. As you went across the bridge, you could see this big picture of Baba. And also I saw pictures of him in the local bookstore. But I remember looking at the pictures and going, he's just too handsome to be a teacher. That's what I thought back then. But time passed, and eventually I was living in Asheville, North Carolina. I was running a holistic health care center. And somebody that was helping me out there gave me a copy of this beautiful book of the Meher Spiritual Center, this wonderful square book with all these pictures. And I remember thinking, I've got to go there someday. And that book was in our waiting room with all the magazines. And every time I'd kind of clear out the magazine, I'd pull that book up and I'd look at it. I go, I think I'd like to go there someday. So one day I finally decided, all right, well, it's a cheap spiritual vacation and it's right by the ocean. I think I'm going to go down to the Meher Baba Center. So I went down and I had my first experience being on the center. And I was like, oh, these Baba people, they're so nice. They're so friendly. They're so kind of disciplined, like the yogis, but kind of practical, like the Native Americans. And they're just so loving. And that really appealed to me. I liked how loving they were. But I wasn't yet drawn to Baba. He worked on me. There were stages. So I went several times. But what happened was my center, the Center for Holistic Health in Asheville, it started to come undone. And I later found out that Baba did dismantle things to his, as he needed to. And it seemed like this place was getting dismantled. And I came to the center one time and I was sitting in the lagoon cabin. And I'm looking through Love Personified. And I'm just flipping through the pages. And sort of realized, oh, this is a history of Baba. And how interesting, how beautiful. And I just started to be interested. Who is this Meher Baba? Because up until that point, I was just kind of thinking, well, these people have they must have a very nice guru, this Meher Baba, because they're such nice people. But at that point in my mind, I'm going, what should I do with my center? I don't know how to handle what's going on. It's just sort of coming undone. I got to the end of Love Personified and I closed the book and I looked up at that picture of Baba sitting in the chair with his legs crossed, and I look up at him and it was like lightning came out of his eyes. I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't a visual experience, but I just felt filled by him. And I went home going, who is this Meher Baba? I went back to Asheville, and all of a sudden the center started being unimportant to me. I just wanted to go back and find out more about Meher Baba. So finally, after having been exposed to him a number of times, I wanted to know more. So I had to have it was Friday afternoon. I had to have a quick staff meeting. I was going with this girl, and I didn't really know her that well, but I also had to drop my computer off to be repaired. And she said, well, I'm going to take your car. And I'm like, well, okay, fine. She takes my car. And I have the staff meeting, and I realized partway through the meeting that I'd forgotten to turn the answering machine off. And the physician who was working out of my center at that time, he said, oh, just leave it, it's okay. A couple minutes later, this message comes. Hello, this is Officer Brown. Your automobile has been in an accident. You need to come down right away and retrieve your automobile. And I'm like, and the funny thing was, I didn't care one bit. I just wanted to go to the Baba Center. And so I run downtown, I pick up the girl, we go in her car, get the car towed, and we head for the center. And I didn't care one bit about what happened in my car. I just wanted to go find out more about Meher Baba. So we start driving, and she's driving the car, and we're driving along, and we're heading towards Myrtle Beach finally. And I turn to her and I go, how much gas do you have in this car? And no sooner were the words out of my mouth than the car stopped. We pull it over, we barely get it over to the side of the road. We have to hitchhike to get gas for the car. And so this lascivious truck driver takes us and making little jokes the whole time, but gets us gas, brings us back to the car. And I say to her, I'm sorry, I'm driving now. I'm over it with you driving today. So I'm driving, and the whole thing never bothered me, because all I wanted to do was go to the Baba Center and find out more about Meher Baba. So I'm driving along, and we're kind of going really slowly on the far side. We're coming from Asheville towards Myrtle Beach. We're on the far side of Columbia, and the traffic is going really slowly. Well, I used to drive a taxi in New York, so I'm like zip, 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 getting in front of everybody. I get to the front of the pack, and I step on it, and just then a siren goes on. Apparently, it was a policeman holding everybody up, making them go slower than the speed limit, waiting for someone to do what I did. He pulls me over to the side of the road, and it's like, I don't care, because I just want to go to the center. And he says, ma'am, you were speeding. And I said, sir, you were holding up all the traffic. And quite frankly, I've already had a car accident. We've already run out of gas. And I really would be grateful if you would just give me a warning. Wait here, ma'am, he says. And he goes off and comes back. He says, now, he hands me a warning. He says, now you drive slowly. And I said, yes, sir, yes, sir. And I speed off. Because all I want to do is go to the Baba Center and find out more about Meher Baba. And interestingly enough, this lady who, like I said, I didn't know her very well. She spent the entire weekend gone looking for clams in Myrtle Beach, which I don't even know if there are clams here. But anyhow, it left me to do my exploration without concern for her. David Barrison kind of took me under his wing at that time, and I remember sitting and telling me all about Baba. And I remember he put his hand on my cheek and he said, he loves you more than you could ever love yourself. And I was like, oh, it's all about love. That's what I thought would be the right thing. That would be real spirituality. And he also told me there was a Baba group up in Asheville. So I got my heart filled with Baba, and I remember I was watching that Irwin Luck movie where he does, there's pictures of Baba moving, and then he does little close-ups of Baba. And there's one, which I've tried to find ever since, and I have not been able to find it, that he's walking and he looks towards the camera, and then there's the close-up and he looks towards the camera, and I swear he looked right into my heart, and it just melted my heart. And so I was so excited when I went back to Asheville that there were a bunch of people there. I could keep learning more about Baba. So I started going to Baba meetings. I was in a Baba meeting, and I'm still, I'd had a lot of exposure to other people, so I'm just enjoying these nice people, and they're thinking what a nice guru Baba is, becoming more and more curious about him. But my center is completely falling apart. So at this point, I'm standing at the table, and I remember Susan Paul was standing next to me. I'm getting my crumpets and tea or whatever. And I say, oh, I need to go on a pilgrimage. And I'm thinking maybe, to Virginia or someplace to go away. And she goes, oh, well, there's a pilgrim center in India. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not what I meant, And I'm like, okay. And I turn away, and she turns away. And then we both turn back, and she says, but if you decide to go, and she starts filling into me how you get to India. And I'm like sort of dumbfounded, because as she's saying it, I have this feeling that without my own volition, I'm going to go to India. And I'm kind of in shock. And I go and I sit down with my tea, and I just kind of breathe out and I go, I'm going to India. Well, there's like Winnie and Debbie and Kathy. They're like, oh, Carolyn's going to India. Carolyn's going to India. And I'm like, this is happening to me, and I haven't even made the decision to go to India, but I feel like I'm going to go. And so I do. And a month later, I'm in India. And so at this point, my center is really coming undone. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but I've decided to go to India anyhow. And I'm up in the Samadhi, and maybe it's just my second day there, and this weeping starts. Tears start coming down my cheeks. And then I'm crying more, and then I'm crying more, and people are looking at me, and I don't know what's going on, and I don't know why I'm crying. I'm thinking maybe it's the center thing, I don't know, but I feel like I have to leave and just get away because I feel like I'm disturbing people. And I go out into what I recall as woods. I subsequently looked for those woods, and I could never find them. There are woods there now. But at the time, I don't know where I was, but I'm weeping, and I'm like, Baba, Baba, because now I'm like into this guy I'm thinking of as the guru. Baba, Baba, what should I do? And suddenly I have a vision, and the vision is of a book. And it says, Baba's Next Wave. And then there's a picture of Baba waving. And then there are ocean waves underneath at the bottom of the picture. And I realize that there's a double meaning about Baba's next wave. And I see the book cover done, and I walk away from there and kind of in my mind going, that's not what I meant. I meant, what should I do with my center? I didn't mean, should I do a book? So I'm like, okay. So I really came to realize after some time what that book title was about, because I didn't have any sense of a book. I had written 2 books before, but I didn't have any sense of writing a book. So as I'm just kind of wondering what it's supposed to be about. But one of the things David Barrison had told me was that you must go to India. Everybody just tells their Baba stories there. So everybody I talked to, I was like, oh, tell me your Baba story. Tell me your Baba story. And then I realized, oh, the book is about Baba stories. And how exciting. And I'd also met this young man named Matthias. Well, that was my maiden name. And my mother would always say, Matthias was the 13th disciple. And I realized that Matthias was kind of the beginning of this next wave of disciples of Jesus. And so I suddenly realized, oh, Baba's next wave. He's talking about the wave of lovers after the Mandali. And so the next wave meant our, hippie generation. And so I went around interviewing one person after another. And interestingly, Baba seemed to edit it. And only certain people, either something would happen to their story or they wouldn't show up for the interview, one thing after another. And what it ultimately became is basically people who really worked for Baba. It was his next wave, his next group of lovers who served him. So anyhow, I got back to the States, and I sold the center, bought an RV, drove to LA, and I spent the next year working on that book, writing that book, transcribing it. I was taping all the stories, transcribing all the stories. It took about a year. Finally, the book was done. I sent it off to the printer, and they sent me a proof. Now, the cover of the book is kind of this beautiful peachy color and purple. It's so pretty. And the proof was brown and puke green. And when I saw it, he says, you have to give me an answer right away. And I'm like, I just burst into tears. I was like, this isn't okay. He says, well, we're not doing it again. And of course, I'm like, Baba, what am I going to do? So he says, I'll give you the names of 3 color separators near you. You have to, it was Friday, you have to go there immediately and get color separations and send them to us Monday. And I'm like, how can that happen? I went to the closest one. I go in, I show him everything. Oh, I think this will be fine. You wait out here in the waiting room, and I'll go see if this guy can do the color separation that quickly. I'm sitting in the waiting room, and I see all these letters from George Lucas to his color separator, his color guy. This was George Lucas's color guy that Baba had sent me to, that Baba had chosen to do the cover of his book. So I thought that was kind of a wonderful sign. So anyhow, I sent off the stuff, and it got printed, and I had a bunch of copies ready and to take them to India. I left out a little part, and that was I took the manuscript to India. So about halfway through my time in California, I took the manuscript to India. And it was all done. There was one story. I felt like I needed one more story. And I took it to the tomb as soon as I got to India. I laid it down at Baba's feet. Now, mind you, I'm still not a Baba lover. I'm just doing this book because I think Baba wants it. He told me to. And I just laid on the tomb, and I said, I hope this is a good thing for you, Baba. And there's one story, I don't know what it's supposed to be. And also, Baba, all these people in this book, they know you're God. And I think you probably might be God, but Baba, if you're God, could you help me have that knowing that the rest of them have? And so a few days later, I'm in Merzat, and it was an amazing day because Erich was there, and Rick Chapman was there, and Robert Dreyfuss. And they were in the 3 corners of the room, and they're just reminiscing, and the rest of us are just sitting there watching and amazed. And it's like we're reliving these days that they were all there with Baba. And it was so suffused with Baba's energy. It was so beautiful. And then, of course, Alaba rang the bell, and everybody went outside. And I couldn't leave the room. And I went over and I bowed down at Baba's chair. And I said, Baba, what must it have been like to be there with you? And when I came up from bowing, Baba was sitting in the chair. And he was gesturing. And I'm sitting there looking at him. He was kind of see-through, but he was all white, but he's gesturing. And I'm watching him for a few moments, and then my mind kicks in. And I go, what's he saying? What's he saying? And very slowly, he just faded away. But I knew he was still there. I knew he was still there. And I had just read something the day before where Mira had said that she would feel Baba's presence, and then she would feel a little breeze, and she would know that he had departed. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just looking, and I feel like he's still there, but I can't see him. And then I see the little ruffle in the bottom of the chair, a little breeze comes through, and I felt like he had departed. And but after that, I knew that he was God. And so I went back to California and finished the story of Meher Baba's Next Wave, and then brought the books back and started to share that with the world. So I took the books to India and shared them, and I just kind of spread them out into the Baba community. And I realized that my time in California was really done, and I wanted to go to Myrtle Beach. And I really felt that I had thought maybe I would be a staff member in India, but it just didn't seem to gel or come together, so I was hoping maybe I could be part of the Myrtle Beach community. I hit the road and headed for South Carolina, but I stopped along the way in Arkansas. And I knew somebody named Joe Bender there, and I needed to stop off. There was a chiropractor there that I wanted to see. And he said, well, be sure to stop in Oklahoma on the way. And, that's where Baba had his accident. So I kind of dutifully stopped in Oklahoma. I couldn't quite tell where the site was, and I wasn't quite sure, but I kind of figured where it might be and said some prayers and went on, and didn't realize at the time that might become very significant to me. So I ended up moving to Arkansas, which wasn't what I planned. And the next year, there was a Sahavas, the 50th anniversary Sahavas of Meher Baba's accident in Prague, Oklahoma. And I was living in Fayetteville, Arkansas, which was only 3 hours away. So I was very excited to go to a Sahavas right nearby. While I was at the Sahavas, I started thinking, well, this is Calvary. This is Baba's Calvary. There should be a center here. And I started asking, I'm like new to Baba, so what do I know? But I would ask different people, and they would go, oh, yes, there should be a Baba Center here. And I'd go, well, who's going to start it? Well, I don't know. And I said, well, maybe we should have a meeting. Oh, yes, we should have a meeting. And so I called a meeting. I didn't know what I was doing, but I called a meeting and anybody who thinks there should be a Baba Center in Prague, or in it was actually Meeker, where the accident was, which is the next town over. Please come to a meeting. So anyhow, I've recorded that whole story at a different time. But I was very honored, I guess. I don't know what word. Pleased, overjoyed to be able to have the opportunity to be a part of getting that center going in Oklahoma. And once it was all completed, we had another Sahavas. And when that Sahavas was done, and there were lots of other people at that point interested in running it and being a part of it, so I decided to finish my trip to Myrtle Beach. And so I loaded up my van and headed to Myrtle Beach. Now, I had had some wonderful spiritual training before that time in my yoga life and in my Native American studies. And so I thought of myself as, I know some spiritual things. And I imagined when I got to Myrtle Beach that I would be welcomed with open arms as somebody who knew something. And I soon discovered that was not the case. And it was kind of the beginning of the grinding, which I remember hearing early on, reading about the New Life, that it was part of the New Life song that we enjoy our suffering. And I was like, what's that about? Who wants to enjoy their suffering? And over the years that I've been here, which at this point is about 18 years, there's been a lot of grinding and a lot of turning to Baba over and over and over in different ways for different reasons. But what I've come to really appreciate is that how much closer the suffering brings us to Baba, and how much I really didn't know when I came here at all. And it's been such a journey that he has softened me and mellowed me and helped me to let go of so many parts of my ego, and there's plenty left still. But it's been a wonderful journey, and a beautiful journey. And I think being near the Baba Center is to put yourself at his feet and let him work on you. And of course he works on everybody everywhere. And that was part of the beads on one string, that he brought me through these different steps and paths so I could write a book about him as a new person, new to Baba. It was fresh, and it was new, and it was alive. And I could help start a Baba Center with all of the enthusiasm and the freshness of a new person. And it was quite a gift to be an ecumenical person, a beads on one string person, when I was in Oklahoma, because there were so many different traditions and religions there as well. And to be able to touch base with those, and then to come and be a part of this very open-hearted, loving Baba community here in Myrtle Beach, and to be so privileged to come across these amazing different people that love Baba in so many different ways. And the loving is in so many different ways, and the beads on one string, and the ways that people see Baba and think of Baba is just profound. I remember one time I was in a room with Jerry Edwards, and somebody was telling him how Baba sees such and such and such and such. And Jerry Edwards says, well, that's not how my Baba sees it. So the diversity that is Baba is stunning. One of the things that happened while I was in Myrtle Beach was that Meher Baba's Next Wave sold out, but I still was loving the Baba stories. And one day I was just missing working on a Baba project, and I really wanted to have a Baba project. And I actually already had a name, and I'd had a name for years at this point, and it was called Waves and Waves of Love. And I originally thought it was going to be to interview the Mandali. I started doing that, but it never quite unfolded. And I was talking to Jeff Wolverton about that, and he said, oh, well, you can do stories of the Baba people here. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, waves and waves of love. That's the layers and layers, the generations and generations of Baba lovers at the Meher Baba Center. And so I started a book that began with Elizabeth receiving the center from her father, and her story, which is retold from a talk that she gave. And then some of the next generation, Adele Woken and Ralph and Stella Hernandez, and some of the early people that were kind of the transition, and then the next wave, and the young hippies that came in, and all the work that was involved in developing the center and spreading the word out to the community, and even the younger generation, the youth Sahavas, and these amazing younger people who have come into the Baba community through the youth Sahavas, getting to know each other and being loving and supportive of each other. And my brother had passed away, and his wife had really tanked. And I brought my nieces and nephew down here for the youth Sahavas, and I swear it saved their lives. I swear that it saved their lives. That is such a way to introduce Baba through community, and Baba's love through the intention that the young people have to love each other and be loving to each other. So that was the last part of Meher Baba's next wave. And then the very end, there are some stories of people who have actually seen Baba on the center. He's appeared to them. So that's just sort of the icing on the cake. And then, but most of my time here has been learning to love him and letting go of my ego. So I'm just really grateful for the whole path, and for him bringing me to him the way that he did. He's such a compassionate and loving Baba. Every morning I say, Baba, thank you for being my Baba. And I feel that from the bottom of my heart. Jai Baba.